everybody, welcome back. Thanks for joining me today. If you're not already subscribed, please make sure you subscribe, smash that like button, and make sure you leave me a comment below. This morning so far I am working on just taking the tape off of a canvas that is finished. I resined it and now it is all dry and cured, and I just want to finish the back of it to prepare to sell it to my client. So I thought I would just kind of show you guys the process. I've had a few questions on just how to get rid of some of these, little problem areas that can give you some trouble here when you're removing resin. So I always, as you can see here, I've got the painter's tape across the whole thing. The painter's tape I use is just the cheap stuff from the dollar store. No point in spending a ton of money on it. I just get this Duramax painter's tape. It's, I think, $2 a roll. Right on. So for me, the best way I find, without using a heat gun, because you can use a heat gun and make this a lot easier, but I tend to not really have a lot of problems removing my resin. Sometimes I get a piece or two that gets stuck, and then I will use a heat gun just to warm the resin up and make it easier. But a lot of the times, especially when you're using these level 3 canvases from Michaels, it just pops. So I'm just kind of rolling it back here towards the edge. You do want to be careful though if you've resined your edge to make sure that you don't pull right into it. So do be really, really mindful. So typically what I do, as you can see, is I'm just slowly pushing it back here. Get up to that edge. Now, the important part, do not pull the tape towards you this way, especially when you've got that edge towards you, because that's when you can rip into the resin on the side, and that will wreck your sides. Not okay. So what I do is, once I've got that kind of fold here, that starts to break a bit of the seal of the resin. So then if you've got a side that came off like that, really gently, you may have to work kind of side to side. Now, if you are going to pull it towards you this way, you just need to make sure that you keep a finger down there and you really take it slow so that you see if it starts to rip into the resin, you stop immediately. This just needs to fold a bit more. You don't want to force it. That's how you can tear it. Take your time with this. I also keep a little X-Acto knife, just in case you need to kind of cut to get one started. So now here we've got a little bit of jagged edge, and I don't personally like that. So all I'm going to do is take my X-Acto knife and just very carefully start to remove some of those edges. Very carefully. You don't want to cut into the resin on the side. Now, just because we're so close to that edge, I'm probably just going to leave this so that I don't cut in at all to that resin. So just push that back down onto the canvas. Make sure there's no pokey, hard parts that are going to hurt your fingers or anything. Now that's fine. All right. Some of it will come off easier than others. It does help too, that kind of earlier you do this part of it. So my typical rule of thumb is once I've done the resin top coat, I will give it about 24 hours. It's not completely cured yet at that point, but it's most of the way there, especially if you're just doing a thin top coat layer. It's pretty much almost all the way there. So it's good that you can touch it a little bit, you can put a bit of weight on it in doing this part of it. You know, this isn't gonna affect the resin on here right now, but it's also not so completely cured that it's not a little bit flexible still. So that kind of makes it a bit easier too. If you wait, say like a week after you've resined it to remove your tape, it's a little more difficult. You likely will have to use the heat gun just to get that warmed up and moving a little bit again to make it a bit easier to get this tape off. So I find about that 24 to 30 hour mark on canvas specifically, if it's not huge. This is a 15 by 30 and I've given this, what time is it? Yeah, just about 20 or just over 24 hours. So, and then I will, once I'm finished with this part, I'll still let it sit for another 24 hours before I give it to the client. The bigger your pieces are, the longer they need. Should be self-explanatory. Smaller pieces, less resin, dry faster. Obviously, the bigger your surface area, the longer it will take. But just like with your acrylic paint, it is important to let these things cure. I know a lot of people talk about, oh, my painting's dry, why can't I resin it now? There is a massive difference between dried and cured. I have talked a little bit about that in a previous video before, but it is so important that it does bear repeating. Some of the long-term effects may take a few years to show up, but one day all of a sudden, you know, you could look at a painting on your wall that, say, you finished and you didn't let cure, and then you varnished it or sealed it. There's still things going on under the surface that you can't see. Yes, your painting might be dry to the touch, and those top, you know, a couple of layers might be dry, but that doesn't necessarily mean what's underneath between the canvas and those few top layers is dry yet. That takes a really long time. What curing is it's removing all of the moisture, all of the water, all of the excess, anything that you've put into your paint, all of that needs to evaporate completely. And that's the difference between dried and cured. Dried to the touch, is just that, it's dry to the touch. Cured is all of the moisture has evaporated so that you are only left with just the paint, like the pigments and that solution, not all of the water that you've mixed in or anything else like that. So with that being said, as you can imagine, if you think about this logically, if you have something that is still kind of wet underneath the dry layer, and then you seal that all in, basically you're just kind of giving a breeding ground for mold, right? You're not giving it anywhere to go or any air to release, and then you've sealed that in so it's not able to evaporate and come out, so it's going to collect on top of that resin surface, or sorry, not on top, but like underneath of that resin surface. It's going to collect up under here. Now that can make your resin go cloudy, kind of give that yellowish tint sometimes. Mostly you'll see like the cloudy, but then you can even get these little like mold spots that will come in where all of a sudden it's like, oh, what the heck is that? Yeah, that can be mold. Then you start talking about all of the things that people are adding into their paints as well to get some of these effects, like the polyacrylic and the Minwax and the Floetrol and all of these other things. You're now adding a whole bunch more chemicals into something, which are going to cause a reaction, right? Because there's other stuff in your paint, being the binders and what goes into the pigments, that's going to have a reaction with a lot of those chemicals that you're putting into it. So if it's not left to properly cure and dry, that itself as well can cause a whole host of issues. And it may not happen immediately, you know, within weeks or months. It may take a while, but I mean, I've seen paintings, I've done experiments on that, And some of the paintings, one of them it took about 2 years, and now the color is going completely cloudy. It looks really, really gross. Same with another one is I used what a lot of people use for the pouring medium, the clear glue. And yeah, after a couple of years, that starts to yellow right away. So, not right away, sorry. That starts to yellow, and it ruins your painting. And for me, I sell a lot of my work or give it as gifts, and I don't want to find out that all of a sudden 2 years down the road, or however long, that painting is just completely compromised and looks terrible and is going to have to be thrown out, right? Because who wants that on their wall? That's gross. And the nice thing when you're using just paint and water, that will reduce, especially specifically on the Dutch pours, it does reduce the curing time because the water will evaporate a lot faster. That paint is so thin, and that water, it tends to evaporate really quick. And because you're not putting anything else into the mix, you're not adding these extra chemicals and, making a difference in your drying time. So they actually do tend to dry a little bit quicker. Though my personal preference still is, so I'll give you this for an example. This is a 15 by 30. I let this dry and then cure. I think it was for 5 weeks almost. 4 to 5 weeks, right around there. I typically will not ever go anything less, even on small pieces. I will typically not go anything less than 3 to 4 weeks. Just no matter what, because I want to make sure 100% that it's dried, it's cured before I put anything on top of it. I don't want to take that risk. So just keep that in mind. So upcoming later, hopefully this week, I will also be putting out someone, I don't know how many yet, probably some more tutorial kind of type videos like this where I'm talking about certain processes and things like that. One of the artists that I watch that I absolutely love, she put out a video the other day just doing an experiment and talking about some things, and as much as I absolutely adore her and love her art, and she was one of the ones who inspired me, she was wrong on a lot of things that she was talking about. And some very simple research into basic and general physics. It's frustrating because she's got such a huge audience, and I know she's working on things and learning herself and experimenting and trying to figure all this out, but it's just kind of frustrating because there's a few things that she's been saying that I just really, on a personal level, don't agree with. And I think I'm going to discuss just maybe some of the topics that she was working on and speaking on, and I guess maybe just give my opinion on it. I also want to look at doing a video, if you guys are interested, on specifically paint brands. Why I absolutely refuse to spend money on things like Creative Inspirations, Craftsmart, all those cheap paints. There's no way. I will not use those anymore. Absolutely not. I do not use pouring mediums. I do not use any additives of any kind whatsoever. I only use high quality paint and water, and that is it. Right now, the only 2 brands of paint that I use are Amsterdam and Golden. These are very high quality paints, very, very high quality pigments, and they can withstand the water, and their binders are just so good in there that they don't break. You don't have to add anything to it. I mean, you do have to be careful that you don't go too thin with the Amsterdam, because it will start breaking eventually if you go over that barrier mark. But one thing I have found with golden pigments just do not break down, almost no matter how much water you put in. I mean, unless you put in, right? I mean, but if we're talking Dutch pour for that kind of amount of water, to thin it down that much, they just don't break. And Golden has done so many tests. It's unbelievable. They actually have a vlog series done by some of their artists that they employ, where they've watered down the Golden heavy body tube paint, and they've watered it down so much to see how far you can take it before it breaks or starts breaking down. And it's phenomenal. It's by far probably the best paint I've worked with. However, it is tough to get a heavy body paint smoothed out and fluid enough for a Dutch pour. It just takes a lot more patience, that's all. Amsterdam is a lot easier to work with because it's a softer body paint, so it's a lot smoother and creamier texture. It's a lot easier to mix down to get to that fluid level. Okay, so that's the bottom. Okay, so now that we've got this off, I've just got a silver Sharpie, which is what I like to use to sign the back. I'm so excited about these pieces. I will show you all three. This was the commission project I did for a friend here. Let me grab the camera and I'll take you down for a close-up. I'm so pleased with how these turned out. Okay, so here is the big 15 by 30 inch canvas. Oh, that gold in there. I'm living for it. And remember, this background has some metallic in it, the black, so that's why you see kind of those spots and stuff there. That's just some of the kind of glitter and metallic in that. Oh, I love this. And then we've got the shelf that I did with it. Oh, this thing just turned out so perfect. I'm so happy with it. And then I also did one more canvas just so she could pick. Sorry about the glare, guys. Just love how these turned out. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts below. Please leave me a comment. Subscribe if you're not. And we'll see you back very, very soon, guys. Have a great day, everybody.